I didn't know the night I called my husband's bluff would be the night my marriage officially died. I thought I was just tired. 12 years of marriage does that to you. It wears you down quietly. No explosions, no dramatic fights, just small dismissals, small lies, small moments where you realize you're standing alone in a room that used to feel like home. That night, I stood close enough to smell her perfume. Expensive. Sharp. The kind of scent women save for hotel rooms and mirrors that aren't theirs. "Tell me something, Edward," I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "When you're out there, playing whatever game this is, do you ever think about the woman at home who spent 12 years believing you?" He turned toward me slowly, and in his eyes, I saw it. Not guilt. Hunger. "You want the truth, Emma?" he said softly, almost amused. "Fine. I'm meeting 2 of my exes tonight." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch, because something inside me had already gone cold. "I probably want to meet them too," I replied. Before he could react, I lifted my phone and opened FaceTime. My sister Karen's face appeared on the screen, confused, half asleep. "Emma, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said evenly. "Edward just has something exciting to share with the family." I turned the phone toward my husband, his face drained of color beneath his perfectly practiced confidence. "Go on," I said. "Tell Karen about your plans tonight." "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. "I'm calling your bluff." I added my parents to the call. My mother's worried face appeared. My father leaned closer to the screen. "What's happening?" my mother asked. "Are you okay?" Edward lunged for the phone. I stepped back. "Tell them," I said quietly. "Tell them about the hotels, the lingerie, the women." The lamp crashed to the floor as he grabbed for his bag. The sound echoed through our living room. Through 12 years of marriage, while my family watched in real time. "Language," I said calmly as he swore at me. "We're on a family call." When I ended the call, the silence was deafening. He stood there breathing hard. Fear flickered across his face. And that's when he realized something had changed. Tomorrow, I thought. The gloves come off. Before everything shattered, I used to believe my marriage was solid. Not exciting, not perfect, but dependable, like a house with good bones. Maybe the paint was peeling. Maybe the roof leaked in one corner. But I believed if you'd invested 12 years into something, you didn't just walk away when it stopped sparkling. I'm 39 years old. I work in operations management for a regional logistics firm. Numbers, schedules, contracts. I've always been the kind of woman who fixes problems quietly, who smooths things over, who believes stability is built, not stumbled into. Edward and I met when we were both broke and hopeful. He was charming in an effortless way, confident without trying too hard. I was drawn to how certain he seemed about everything, where we'd live, what success looked like, who he was going to become. I mistook certainty for character. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. He knelt in a crowded restaurant, hands shaking just enough to make it feel sincere. Everyone clapped. I cried. He slid the ring onto my finger like he was claiming a future he already felt entitled to. The first years of marriage were fine. We built a life that looked impressive from the outside. Nice house, reliable cars, vacations that photographed well. Edward moved up quickly in sales, learned how to talk his way into rooms that impressed people. I stayed steady, predictable, responsible. Somewhere along the way, our roles calcified. I became the background structure, the woman who remembered appointments, paid bills, handled logistics, smoothed social edges. Edward became the main character, the one with stories, the one people gravitated toward at parties. I told myself that was normal. I told myself marriage was about balance. The first signs were small. Edward started caring more about appearances than connection. Designer clothes, expensive cologne, gym sessions that stretched longer and later. He'd come home buzzing with energy, but not for me. He'd scroll on his phone while I talked, laugh at messages he didn't explain, lock his screen when I walked by. When I asked questions, he smiled like I was being silly. "You're overthinking," he'd say. "Don't be insecure." Can't I have a life? I swallowed every doubt because I didn't want to be that woman. His family made it easier to doubt myself. They adored him. Edward could do no wrong in their eyes. If he forgot birthdays, he was busy. If he snapped, he was stressed. If I raised concerns, I was too sensitive. His mother once told me, half joking, "A good wife knows when to let things go." So I did. I let go of conversations that ended in dismissal. I let go of intuition. I let go of the version of myself that asked for clarity instead of peace. What I didn't realize was that while I was letting things go, Edward was letting me disappear. By the time that night arrived, the perfume, the confession, the FaceTime call, I wasn't reacting to one betrayal. I was finally seeing the pattern. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. After that night, nothing exploded immediately. That was the strangest part. Edward didn't come home. No dramatic exit speech. No apology. Just silence. Sharp, deliberate, and cruel in its restraint. The house felt different the next morning. Too quiet. Too clean. Like a stage after the actors have walked off, leaving the props behind. I made coffee out of habit. Poured 2 cups before I realized I only needed 1. The first seed of conflict wasn't anger. It was clarity. When Edward finally came back later that afternoon, he acted like we were in a negotiation, not a marriage. "We don't need to involve everyone," he said calmly, loosening his tie. "Let's handle this like adults." Adults. As if he hadn't announced his infidelity like a dare the night before. As if I hadn't watched his confidence crumble the moment witnesses appeared. I didn't argue. I observed. That's when I noticed the shifts. He started guarding his phone with intention, not instinct. Changed passwords, took calls outside. Started using phrases like "my privacy" and "boundaries." Words he'd never cared about when it was me compromising mine. His schedule became abstract. Late meeting, client dinner, team retreat. No names, no details. And when I asked, really asked, he didn't deny anything. He deflected. "You're spiraling. You want there to be something wrong. You're trying to control me." That was when his friends entered the picture. Men who laughed too loudly and avoided eye contact with me. Women who smiled sympathetically, but never met my gaze long enough to lie convincingly. Dinners where conversations stopped when I entered the room. One night, his coworker Alyssa called. Cheerful, casual. "Girls' night," she said. "Edward said you wouldn't mind." I did mind, but I said nothing. Because somewhere along the line, I'd been trained to swallow discomfort to preserve harmony. His family doubled down. His mother called me, voice gentle but firm. "Men go through phases," she said. "You don't throw away a marriage over curiosity." Curiosity, that's what she called it. I started replaying moments I'd dismissed. The unexplained hotel charges. The credit card statements I never reviewed closely because we trusted each other. The unfamiliar lingerie receipts I assumed were surprises that never came. Memory became evidence. The air between us thickened. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Every silence loaded. Edward walked through the house like a guest, careful not to touch, careful not to commit. And then came the smallest moment that broke something open. I found his spare phone, tucked behind the toolbox in the garage. Powered off. No notifications. Not hidden well. Almost like he wanted to be caught. I didn't turn it on. I didn't need to. The conflict wasn't growing anymore. It was already rooted. And something inside me, quiet, steady, awake, started preparing for what came next. The real rupture didn't happen with shouting. It happened with evidence. 2 days after I found the spare phone, Edward left early. Earlier than usual. No coffee, no eye contact, just keys, jacket, and that rehearsed calm men wear when they think they've already won. That was the morning I opened our shared accounts. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the house wrapped in a silence so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the stove. I told myself I was just checking. just confirming that my fear had no foundation. It took less than 10 minutes. Hotel charges. Not one, not two. A pattern. Same downtown hotel. Same weekday afternoons. Charges for room service I'd never eaten. Drinks I'd never ordered. And lingerie purchases. Expensive, deliberate. Billed to a card I paid every month. My hands didn't shake. That scared me. I cross-checked dates. His late meetings. His team dinners. His retreat. They lined up perfectly. I opened the phone records next. Our family plan gave me access. Something he'd never bothered to change because he never thought I'd look. Location data. Message logs. Numbers saved under initials. There it was. Proof doesn't scream. It settles. By the time Edward came home that night, I had everything laid out in my mind like a chessboard. I didn't confront him immediately. I waited until dinner. We sat across from each other, the same table where we'd celebrated promotions, anniversaries, small victories. He ate like nothing had changed. "So," I said casually, "how was the client meeting?" He didn't even flinch. "Long," he said. "Productive." I nodded. Then I slid my laptop across the table. The screen glowed between us. Hotel charges, dates, times. The color drained from his face slowly, like ink in water. "You went through my accounts," he said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "It's not what it looks like." That was the moment something broke cleanly inside me. "Yes," I replied. "I did." He leaned back, exhaled, and smiled. The same smile he used on clients when negotiations turned difficult. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. "It's just physical. It doesn't mean anything." Physical. As if intimacy were a transaction. As if 12 years were a footnote. I stood up then. My legs felt steady. My voice didn't waver. "You lied," I said. "You used our money. You used my trust. And you assumed I'd keep protecting you." He laughed softly. "You won't do anything," he said. "You never do." That was the inciting moment, not the affair. Not the evidence, but the certainty in his voice when he said that. Because he was wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't collapse into tears the way movies train us to expect women to do when their marriages implode. I sat back down. That unnerved him more than any outburst ever could. Edward watched me carefully, like he was trying to decide whether this was a phase or a performance. He'd spent years learning how to manage my emotions, how to wait out my silences, how to let my frustration burn itself out. But this wasn't that. This was stillness. "I need time," I said. He nodded quickly, relief flashing across his face. "Of course, take all the time you need." That was his mistake. Because I wasn't asking for time to forgive him. I was taking time to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. That night, after he fell asleep, careless, confident, victorious, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed 12 years in reverse, searching for the moment I'd taught him that I would always stay. I questioned myself. Had I ignored signs because leaving felt like failure? Had I mistaken patience for strength? Had I been so focused on being reasonable that I'd forgotten to be respected? I didn't absolve myself. But I also didn't accept blame that wasn't mine. The next morning, I called in sick, not because I was weak, but because clarity requires space. I went through the house slowly, touching objects like artifacts from a past life. Wedding photos, souvenirs from trips where I now questioned whether I'd ever truly been present. Edward texted me twice that day. "We should talk. You're overreacting." I didn't reply. Instead, I made my first phone call, then my second, then my third. Quiet conversations, careful questions. No accusations, just verification. By evening, I knew enough to understand this wasn't an isolated lapse. It was a system, a pattern supported by friends who lied for him, schedules designed to obscure truth, and a confidence built on the assumption that I'd never enforce boundaries. That night, I did something small but symbolic. I removed my wedding ring. I didn't throw it. I didn't hide it. I placed it on the kitchen counter, exactly where he'd see it when he came home. Edward arrived late. He noticed the ring immediately. "What's this?" he asked, voice tight. "I'm thinking." I said simply. He scoffed. Don't be dramatic. I met his eyes. This is me being precise. For the first time since we'd met, he looked uncertain. And uncertainty, I was learning, was where his power ended. Edward didn't back down. He escalated. That's what men like him do when they realize control is slipping. They tighten their grip, enlist allies, rewrite narratives. The first call came from his mother. I was in my car outside the grocery store when her name flashed on my screen. I hesitated, then answered. Emma, she said, voice already heavy with judgment. Edward is beside himself. He says you're shutting him out. I stared through the windshield at nothing in particular. He cheated, I replied calmly. A pause, then a sigh. Well, marriages are complicated, she said. You don't air private issues like this. You're embarrassing him. There it was. Not concern for me, not outrage at his betrayal, but fear for his image. The calls kept coming. His sister, an aunt, a family friend who barely knew me but felt qualified to advise. Each conversation followed the same script. Men make mistakes. Don't throw everything away. Think about how this looks, as if my pain or a public relations issue. Edward's friends circled next. Men who suddenly needed to check in. Women who messaged me vague encouragement paired with subtle blame. One text read, "He's really struggling. Maybe you pushed him away without realizing it." That night, Edward tried a different approach. He brought wine. My favorite. Set it on the counter like an offering. "We can fix this," he said softly. "Counseling, rules, transparency." Rules. As if fidelity were negotiable. "I didn't cheat," I said, "so I don't need fixing." His jaw tightened. "You're acting like I destroyed your life." I looked at him then. Really looked. "You didn't destroy my life," I said. "You exposed who you are in it." The next escalation came with proof. A friend forwarded me something Edward didn't realize was public. Photos from a downtown hotel lobby. Him. Another woman. Intimate. Familiar. Time-stamped. Shared casually. That was when something shifted permanently inside me. I stopped hoping. I stopped explaining. And I started preparing. I met with a lawyer, not to attack, but to protect. I reviewed accounts, documents, ownership, contingencies. Edward noticed the change immediately. "You're being cold," he accused. "No," I replied. "I'm being accurate." The arguments grew sharper, shorter, more dangerous. He accused me of spying. I accused him of lying. He raised his voice. I lowered mine. And in that imbalance, I felt something new taking shape. Not rage, resolve. Because while he was busy defending his reputation, I was quietly reclaiming my reality. The lowest point didn't come with a fight. It came with emptiness. Edward stopped pretending to try. No more wine. No more apologies disguised as negotiations. He started coming home later, sometimes not at all. When he did, he moved through the house like a stranger, killing time in a hotel room. Shower, bed, phone, silence. I slept on the couch, not because he asked, because I couldn't breathe next to him anymore. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of keys. He stumbled in smelling like alcohol and someone else's perfume, different from the first one, cheaper, louder, careless. He didn't even look at me, just stepped over my feet like I was furniture. That was the moment the grief finally hit. Not sharp, heavy. It settled in my chest like wet cement. 12 years collapsed into a single question I couldn't outrun. How did I become so invisible in my own life? I cried quietly, face buried in a pillow so he wouldn't hear. Not because I wanted his comfort, but because I refused to give him the satisfaction of knowing how deeply he'd wounded me. The next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. My body simply refused. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. Work, family, friends who didn't know what to say and said the wrong things anyway. Stay strong. Everything happens for a reason. At least you don't have kids. as if that made it smaller. I walked through the house later that day and realized something terrifying. Nothing here felt like mine anymore. Not the couch, not the kitchen, not even the bedroom I decorated with care. Every room echoed with compromise. That night, Edward finally spoke the truth. Not angrily, not cruelly, just honestly. I don't think I was ever meant for this kind of life, he said, scrolling through his phone. I felt trapped by loyalty, by consistency, by a woman who believed commitment meant something. I went into the bathroom and locked the door, sat on the floor, and for the first time I wondered, not if I could survive this, but why I ever thought I had to endure it. That was my darkest moment. Not because I was broken, but because I finally understood how close I'd come to losing myself completely. The turning point didn't arrive with revenge. It arrived with confirmation. 2 mornings after that night on the bathroom floor, I received a message I hadn't expected. From someone who had no reason to protect me and no reason to lie. It was Edward's coworker, a man I'd met twice at company events. Polite, neutral, forgettable. I don't want to be involved, the message began, but I think you deserve to know what's been happening. My hands were steady as I read. He didn't editorialize, he didn't dramatize. He simply laid out facts, dates, places, names. The same downtown hotel, the same patterns, the same lies Edward had told everyone, including his own workplace. And then one line that changed everything. He tells people you're aware and fine with it, that you've checked out of the marriage. I stared at the screen for a long time. That wasn't just betrayal. That was erasure. I wasn't a wife in his story anymore. I was a prop. I thanked the coworker and deleted the thread. Not out of fear, but out of completion. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need witnesses. I didn't need validation. What I needed was a decision. I met my lawyer that afternoon. Not in tears, not in anger, but clear. We reviewed everything: assets, ownership, protections, what I could do, what I shouldn't do, what was legal, what was smart. You're in a stronger position than you think, she said. I nodded. I know. That night, Edward came home late again, tossed his keys on the counter like nothing mattered. I'm done pretending, he said. This isn't working. I looked at him, really looked, and felt nothing. No, I replied. It isn't. He blinked. That's it? That's clarity. I didn't beg. I didn't negotiate. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I told him I wanted separation. Legal. Immediate. For the first time since this began, he panicked. You're being dramatic, he said. You'll regret this. I smiled then, not kindly, not cruelly. Edward, I said, I already regret staying. That was the moment power shifted, not because I won, but because I stopped participating in his version of reality. The fallout wasn't loud at first. It unfolded the way truth always does, quietly, then all at once. Once I filed for separation and froze the joint accounts pending review, Edward's carefully managed life began to unravel. Not because I announced anything, not because I told stories, but because the lies he'd been juggling no longer had me cushioning their impact. The first thing to collapse was his narrative. He tried to tell people I was overreacting, that we were taking a break, that this was mutual. But stories like that only work when the other person stays silent in the right way, ashamed, apologetic, pliable. I stayed silent differently. I stopped answering questions that weren't asked in good faith. I stopped smoothing over awkward moments. I stopped covering for his absences and excuses. And suddenly, people noticed what they'd been trained not to see. Hotel charges flagged at work, missed meetings, whispers that didn't need my help to spread. His family circled once more, this time with urgency. You've gone too far, his mother said over the phone. You're humiliating him. I didn't humiliate anyone, I replied. I stepped aside. That distinction mattered. Friends who once defended him began distancing themselves, not dramatically, just subtly. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered. The same people who'd told me men make mistakes didn't want to be associated with the consequences of those mistakes. Edward came home one night furious. "They're turning on me," he snapped. "You told them something." I looked up from packing a box. "No," I said. I stopped lying. That was when he understood what he'd lost. Not the marriage. The shield. The house became tense, then empty. He slept elsewhere more often than not. When he did come by, it was to collect things. Shirts, shoes, fragments of a life that no longer fit together. Each visit was shorter, quieter, smaller. I moved through the space differently, not like a guest, like someone reclaiming square footage. The final confrontation came not with shouting, but resignation. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said one evening, standing in the doorway. I folded a sweater and placed it in a box. "Neither did I," I replied. "But I always thought it would end honestly." He left after that, not in anger, in defeat, and I stood alone in a house that finally felt quiet in the right way. The morning after Edward moved out, I woke up before sunrise. The house was still. No footsteps, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no tension humming in the walls. Just light filtering through the kitchen window, soft and indifferent to everything I'd survived. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. I made coffee and stood at the counter, watching steam rise from the mug, thinking about how close I'd come to disappearing inside a life that looked successful, but felt hollow. How easily I'd confused endurance with loyalty. How often I'd told myself, this is just what marriage is. It isn't. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, ordinary victories. Signing documents without shaking hands. Sleeping through the night. Laughing without checking my phone afterward. I didn't rebuild myself dramatically. I remembered myself. I remembered that I am capable of clarity without cruelty. That strength doesn't require noise. That walking away is sometimes the most powerful statement you can make. Edward tried to reach out once more. A message, short and careful. "I hope you're okay." I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness. Out of closure, because some chapters don't need an epilogue. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of a truth you've been avoiding, let me say this clearly. Love does not require you to shrink. Commitment does not demand self-erasure, and loyalty is not proven by how much pain you tolerate. I didn't destroy my marriage. I stopped pretending it was alive. And in doing that, I found something far more valuable than forgiveness. I found myself.